Good morning, everybody. Good morning, dear participants, and welcome to our webinar, Driving Markets Through Public Procurement, the Big Buyers Project. The specific topic of this webinar is how to procure recycled asphalt. We are happy that there have been many registration and interest also for this webinar, and we really look forward for the presentations from our speakers. Before starting with the content of the webinar, I would like just to recall some housekeeping remarks. So please, for the audience, please mute your mic, switch off the camera. To submit questions or any comments, please use our application, Slido, and identifying your question when raising your question, and also indicate to whom the question is addressed. All questions will be read by us and addressed to the speakers. If any question remains unanswered, we will also answer them afterwards through the LinkedIn group, which is called Agents of Innovation Procurement, and we will also make the link available to you. Also, if you have any problems, please write to us in the chat. The objective of today's webinar is twofold. First is to provide the elements for a procurement procedure which is about recycling the asphalt. We have a number of pioneers in this field, which is really new and is a very interesting outcome of the Big Buyers project, and also how you can participate in the forthcoming Big Buyer project, which has just been launched. The meeting is structured in three specific parts. The first part will be about the presentations from our distinguished speakers. This is going to be followed by Q&A questions, which, as I said before, you will be able to post your questions via Slido. And then I will shortly present the future Big Buyers project and other activities that we carried out and which might be relevant for the participants in today's webinar. So I would like just to start by also introducing our very distinguished speakers. The first one is Sylvia Slomiak, Project Coordinator for Prospect at Eurocities. The second one is Leon Dijk, Sustainability Project Manager from the city of Rotterdam, the Netherlands, and Maria Nereves, Advisor at the Direction of Maintenance and Conservation, City of Lisbon, Portugal. Having now introduced the speakers, I think that without any further ado, it's time to start with the content of our very interesting webinar, and I will pass the floor to Sylvia, who will provide an overview of the results of the Big Buyers project, and namely of the working group on circular construction material focusing on asphalt. Sylvia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivo. Yes, I'm very happy to be here and to see Maria and Leon again, as we worked together for a while. I had the pleasure to facilitate this particular working group, and I will give you a short overview. I will introduce you to the beginnings of the working group, the main aims, and also the outcomes, the results of what the members managed to achieve. Let me share the presentation. Can you see it?
Perfect.
I guess so. Good. So once again, this is a overview of the results achieved during the previous edition of the Big Buyers, where we had 4 working groups, and some of you have probably managed to join webinars on the results of the other groups. Today we will focus on this particular group, which aimed to discuss circular construction in a broader sense. But because the topic of circular construction is quite broad, from practical reasons, there had to be a decision to narrow it down to something particular, something more concrete that the group would be able to work on, and towards achieving some tangible results, something that would be useful to the group members, but also hopefully to other public buyers who can benefit from what has been produced. I don't have that much time, so I have also linked some information that we have prepared, which is still useful, and you can download it from a link I will share with you in a second. So, like I mentioned, the main aim was to develop an understanding of what is needed to run proper procurement, successful, innovative, and strategic procurement within the area of circular construction. The whole idea behind international cooperation of representatives of public institutions, public buyers, big buyers as we called them, was to exchange their experiences and also to see what kind of barriers and challenges are faced overall across Europe, and also whether there are some organizations, some buyers who have successfully already overcome those barriers and can help others. I'm sorry, to copy or replicate their approaches. It was important to understand the local context, the differences across the member states, the countries that participants represented, because although we have EU regulations that regulate the procurement as such, there are some national regulations, some national practices and standards on national and local level, which also impact what buyers can do within a specific topic. So this was important, and it was also important to share experience with on legal conditions on the legal setup that is used. All of this, like I mentioned, was aimed at comparing procurement strategies. The working group, which we are talking about today, decided to focus on asphalt and decided to focus on the aspects of procuring asphalt that seemed mostly generally applicable across member states, because there are many differences. Asphalt is a very local topic. It's produced locally. Market actors, producers are generally not interested in selling abroad because of the transportation and because of the practicalities, also because of the differences in production, the differences in the material that can be used for producing asphalt. For example, the availability of stones and the distance to get the stones to produce asphalt. So this was something that the members had to discuss, understand, and decide on in order to produce something that would be really generally applicable and could be used across Europe. Because of that, and that followed a study visit and meetings with market actors, with producers in Rotterdam, and Leon will tell you a little bit more about Rotterdam's approach and experience. Because of that, the group decided to focus on investigating the benefits of using performance-based award criteria. So basically not limiting, not specifying too much what producers, what bidders need to provide, and focusing on what are the expected results from the bidders and evaluating those, creating award criteria that really respond to the performance rather than to very clearly specified scope of what needs to be provided. This offers more flexibility, which means it also promotes and supports more innovative solutions, and producers can then decide in what way they would be able to meet this criteria. We also discussed the methods of asphalt production, those methods that are more environmentally friendly, they produce less emissions, for example, indirect heating, and we had an opportunity to visit an asphalt production plant that uses indirect heating, so we were able to actually see the equipment, see what it looks like. And also the group really wanted to pay attention to the trade-offs and to the links between circularity and sustainability. As it was established, it's not always the same. And by focusing on circularity, we cannot forget that the overall aim is to be more sustainable. So pushing for the highest amount of recycled material, for example, might not in the end be the most successful solution in terms of achieving sustainability goals. So this is also a challenge and a very interesting topic that was touched upon by the members. We had market dialogue sessions, which means we met with some producers and representatives of producers, associations of producers, but also associations of buyers. For example, with the European Association of Asphalt Producers, but also the Conference of Directors of Road Directorates. So we had an opportunity to gather feedback from those organizations, from their members through those we met. And this was to understand the perspective of market actors. What are the main barriers? What are the costs? What is the potential from the market actors' perspective? Also in terms of, for example, planning some joint procurement, which, like I mentioned before, did not seem reasonable or realistic because of the differences and also the dependence of asphalt production on very local conditions. Through market dialogue, we have heard that the sector was under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure because of the ongoing financial and energy crisis. The bitumen that's used for asphalt production is largely dependent on the material imported from Russia. So producers had to start looking at more sustainable, more innovative approaches and solutions to remain profitable. And we heard quite a lot of worrying statements that many asphalt production plants might not survive the crisis. So it is really important for the buyers to understand this and to try to find solutions, approaches to help the sector to actually survive. This might mean being more flexible. This might mean revisiting some standards and norms and requirements that have been there so far, all in order to support the asphalt sector to really survive the crisis. If you are interested in all takeaways and lessons learned, examples, and procurement practices that we have discussed, we have produced a lessons learned report which summarizes also the basics of what circular asphalt is, what is the difference between reclaimed asphalt and recycled asphalt, what are the different technologies. There are links to very useful resources where you can learn even more. And there are also examples from the members on what's going on in their countries and how the situation has been developing. So I do invite you to have a look at this report. It's not just a summary of what we did, but we really tried to produce something that other buyers can use and that will be applicable for some time, and is also a starting point for more discussion on what buyers can do to support the market. Another important result of the group's work was putting together a joint declaration of intent, which was challenging. It required a lot of flexibility from our members because of the varying situation in their organizations and in their countries, different market maturity in their respective countries, also different approaches, different regulations when it comes to updating some standards or approaches, for example. So this was a quite difficult exercise, but also showed a lot of goodwill and conviction that an international group can do quite a lot when it comes to producing something useful on an international level. This joint declaration of intent summarizes the main findings, the issues that the group's members understood and acknowledged based on the exchanges with market actors, but also it indicates what issues and topics seem most important and also realistic for them to start working on them within their own organizations. For example, what kind of award criteria could be introduced, what kind of technology or technological criteria could be used in next projects. So there is a list of these in this document, and we have quite many signatories already, which was also a sign of the success of this document, which was prepared by 5 organizations, and then I think 9 more decided to sign it as well. And we invite more also to have a look and contact us if you would like to be a signatory. So what are those main recommendations, just in a nutshell? Promoting low temperature asphalt when we are looking at reducing CO2 emissions as our main objective, but also looking at environmentally related award criteria, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, and increasing the proportion of reclaimed and thus recycled asphalt, meaning that currently, depending on the countries, depending on also local regulations and standards, there is a cap on how much recycled or reclaimed material can go into asphalt mixes. In some countries, it might be, for example, 20%, and they cannot go above that. That would really require revisiting this and re-establishing a new target or a new standard, a new cap. Some producers told us that they can go up to even 80% or even 90%. We heard about some ambitious examples from Switzerland, for example. So this is possible, and here more flexibility would be welcome if buyers want to support the industry in overcoming the current crisis. However, also there was an interesting comment coming from the industry, from market actors, stating that from their point of view, pushing for a very high percentage of reclaimed material is also not optimal, may also not be optimal for producers, because that still would limit their flexibility in terms of what they can provide. And the other most important issues that also were elaborated on in the joint declaration of intent was using the performance-based procurement approach, meaning also using the product category rules and environmental product declarations. And I'm sure Leon will say a little bit more about that, because Rotterdam is quite advanced when it comes to this approach. There was also a need underlined for matching supply and demand and minimizing transportation materials. That also includes better information sharing between the buyers and the producers. So the producers know what projects are coming up. They know, for example, what and how many roads will need to go undergo maintenance, will be rebuilt, and therefore there will be asphalt that can be reclaimed and then reused. This also is linked with adapting the verification process and current local standards. And what's important also, revisiting regulations that categorize asphalt as waste. Because, for example, after a road is being maintained or rebuilt, in some countries, the asphalt cannot be reused because it's categorized by waste, and you cannot do anything with it, which is a waste. And finally, also improving dialogue and information sharing and mutual understanding. We have seen that not only the international level of market dialogue was helpful, but in some countries, I think Maria will talk about it, in some countries, they also started local market dialogue, meeting with local market actors, which also was interesting to see, because at the beginning, they were not interested at all. They did not see any need to move towards those sustainable technologies and using more reclaimed material. But because of the crisis, because of the rising energy costs, they started looking for more solutions. And suddenly we see that they are now interested in cooperating with buyers on that. So this is to give you an idea of who has already signed the Declaration of Intent. As you can see, it's not only cities, it's also various organizations that support what's in this declaration. And we also invite you to use this as a starting point for boosting and developing the discussion on your level. And some examples of what the group's members have already done in Rotterdam and in Lisbon. There are already pilot tenders that concern recycled asphalt. In Vienna, for example, they are looking at reducing the amount of asphalt in the city and as part of lowering temperatures in the city. So they are actually looking at removing some asphalt and replacing it with greenery, for example. In Bordeaux, the goal is to increase the recycle of asphalt, or actually construction waste, to 70%. So you can see some of the examples described in more detail in the document I have mentioned. And those documents you can find on the brand new Public Buyers Community platform, which we invite you to join, because it's a very new space that public buyers across Europe can use, not only to focus on asphalt, not only to focus on the big buyers project, the previous editions, but mainly the new edition, which will be hosted on that platform. But whatever topics you are interested in, you can join and you can become members of collaboration spaces over there. If you click on this link here below, this will take you directly to a list of most important results of the previous edition, those that we think will continue to be applicable and will continue to be useful for some more time. And we didn't want it to get lost among all the information that is out there. So I tried to be brief because I know Maria and Leon will talk more about the practicalities of the buyers, but I'm very happy to take questions at the end if you would be interested in this overall process of collaboration and any aspects of what I have already presented.
Many thanks, Silvia, for this very rich and comprehensive presentation of the results of the working group on recycled asphalt, and also for introducing our new platform. We will be sending the link to all participants, registered participants, to today's webinar, so they will this will allow them to get a direct access to all the information which is stored in there about the results of the Big Buyers project. I would like now to invite Leon to continue with his presentation, where he will get into the details of the experience of Rotterdam, which is indeed the pioneer in Europe in this world of recycling asphalt. Leon, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Ivo. I will just try to find the slides. I think it's better that we share the slides by you, because I need to go to another browser. So could you share it maybe on the screen?
That's okay, yes.
Yes, well, that's it. I will just, as Ivo and Sylvia already mentioned, focus now a little bit on the technicalities of how we procure innovation within road infrastructure in Rotterdam. And part of it has already been touched by the presentation of Sylvia, but I will just now move to a more deeper understanding of it. So can I just, yeah, so this is just our road infrastructure in Rotterdam to give you a view on the amounts of asphalt and materials that we use. So we have about 25 square kilometers of roads, 25% of asphalt, which is of course mostly used in the major roads, some other roads and parking lots. Also the bicycle roads are an important application of asphalt. So asphalt is being used quite a lot in cities, but that's, I think, the general situation everywhere. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so as Sylvia mentioned, it was quite a hurdle in the group on how to get our focus ready on circular construction. And as asphalt is being used widely in road construction, we thought as a buyer group to focus on the practicalities on how to procure this. And well, there's a lot going on in infrastructure in asphalt producing. It's not only the production, but also the maintenance, the use of machinery. In Rotterdam, we're not only focusing on the materials, we're always also focusing on zero emission construction processes, so zero emission vehicles and other tools that we use to try the emissions on the construction place as low as possible, which is also part of the procurement strategy. But in this presentation, we will just focus mainly on the materials. Okay. Yeah, so we published, last year we published a framework agreement on asphalt maintenance, which is one of our largest maintenance contracts. It's a European tender, but as Sylvia already mentioned, the sector is very locally organized, so it's asphalt is being regionally sourced, so there's not really a single market for it on a European scale, but anyhow, we publish a public tender, of course, because that's the European procurement law. It's a framework contract for 4 years, so 2 years with 2 optional contract years. We started this year, and it has a value of about 40 million. And the objective of it is just to get the maintenance ready, so resurfacing, reconstructing, getting markings on it, and all the management around it. We expect that about 600,000 tons of asphalt will be produced during this contract. And we published it as 2 lots, which is the reason behind it is that we wanted to include a lot that was dedicated to innovation. As you can understand, that innovation procurement takes often more time to prepare. So there's 1 lot dedicated for this, and the other lot is mainly dedicated to quick and quick maintenance. So you don't have time every time to build innovation within your project. So we have just 2 lots, and we try to get up to 50% of all the projects within the lot of the innovation procurement part. So hopefully this will work out the coming years. We have 6 contractors. The market response, I will come to talk about it a little bit later, but the market response was quite large, which was quite encouraging. The first lot, which is a normal lot, lowest price, has already 9 applicants, and the second lot was about 4 applicants. So in totally we have 6 contractors, which 5 SMEs, because in Rotterdam we actually focus on SMEs. We like to have them included in the maintenance and in the contracts, because that's also part of our local economy. Yeah, next one, please. So the procurement approach was basically to build in an innovation challenge to get contractors on the move to supply circular construction materials without the risk of having construction durability risk, because if you are building a construction which has a low environmental impact but doesn't last, it's not sustainable. So the construction durability, so the functionality of the road, is just top of the list. This is our framework, and within that boundaries, we are actually challenging the contractors to offer innovative mixtures that meet the requirements of the construction. So this is very important to realize. Again, lowest environmental impact without that doesn't last, because it's not really fit in the functionality. That doesn't work at all. So be aware of this. As you know, innovation procurement is mainly about the contractual outcomes instead of prescribing suppliers or contractors how to do it. And the instrument that we used for this was the environmental cost indicator, which is a single indicator which is being used widely nowadays in the Netherlands. which is based on a life cycle assessment and which allows contractors and producers to innovate within the whole product chain, so from cradle to grave. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. So how does the environmental cost indicator actually work? For those of you who don't know, not familiar with life cycle assessment is basically an instrument to assess the environmental impact from cradle to grave, which includes both all the processes within the product chain, but also a couple of environmental indicators. And the reason why we do this is because we think that sustainability should not be only about CO2 or just a single indicator, but should have a broad view on environmental impacts across what we think is important. But the trade-off of this is that it's very hard to interpret different outcomes on the impact category. So we want to combine this towards a single indicator, which is always a subjective choice because you need to normalize the outcomes of 15 indicators to just one single indicator. But that's, from a practical point of view, the only way to compare outcomes within procurement. So this involves a little subjectivity or always, but that's the only way to be able to get this in practice and to get this workable. Now, this single score indicator is basically the environmental cost indicator, which is a monetary value. So in terms of euros, we actually can express the environmental impact of a project or a product. Yeah, next slide. So what are the key environmental indicators within the road infrastructure and especially the asphalt sector? Well, you see here on the left side, the life cycle from primary raw material extraction to demolition. There are many steps within the chain that you want to assess. As I said, the production of materials is just one thing. We in Rotterdam also focus on transportation and on the tools that you need to actually construct your project. Which is also part of the environmental cost indicator. So some public entities only use this indicator to just assess all the processes within. That's also possible. But the key environmental indicators are basically three. They are energy usage during the production. As you know, as you can imagine, the production of asphalt is quite intensive in terms of energy. You need a lot of energy to get the mixtures in a certain temperature. There are also emission flows that has an impact on the environment, the PAH and the NOx and particulate matter. And there's of course a resource issue on the bitumen and the granulates. Especially the bitumen is quite scary because there is a supply risk already there. So actually, these environmental flows have an impact on the wider environment in terms of global warming, human health, and abiotic resource depletion. And these are the impact categories that we want to address when it comes to the environmental performance of asphalt projects in general. Yeah. So this is more that I will just go quickly to this graph because it's kind of complicated, but I just want to show you that when you look at the life cycle stages of different asphalt types, this picture makes clear that the dominant environmental load is occurring during production. So it's actually the resource use, the bitumen, for example, the granulates, transportation, and the production, and especially the resources. So the blue lines are actually the processes that contribute the most to the life cycle impact of different asphalt mixtures. There's always, for those of you who are familiar with asphalt, there are numerous types of asphalt because you use them in different layers. And that makes it also complicated sometimes to focus generally on the recycled content because on the surface layer, for example, there are higher risks for in terms of functionality and durability. So what you see in practice, that the highest recycled materials are being used in the under layers, because that's less risky than the surface layers. But this picture makes clear that almost 90% of total impact is caused within the upstream processes. Okay, next slide. Now, the question arises when it comes to recycled asphalt, what is the impact of recycling on the total environmental impact? And this picture makes clear that recycling is beneficial. It saves almost 50% of your environmental impact. So in general, it's safe to focus just on recycled content in asphalt, which is one of the reasons why many public entities just ask that directly in their tenders. The trade-off of this is that you're actually not looking to other processes within the life cycle that can be beneficial as well, like lower temperatures, etc. So we use a more life cycle approach, a more systematic approach, where there are more innovation opportunities within the production phases to get environmental savings. Okay, next slide. Yeah, it was already mentioned just quickly, is circularity always sustainable? What's in asphalt is not the case. There's been a study done by the TU of Wien, the Austria University, that actually calculated the recycling impacts of asphalt. You see, for example, that in the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, it's hard. If you're going to recycle this, it's actually storing up in the stock. So you need to be very aware that you phase this out in final sinks. That's the next slide. So be aware that, the next slide, please. Yeah, so you need to be aware that you are taking care of certain toxic materials during your recycling processes and directing them to final waste sinks instead of keeping them in your system, because that's not beneficial at all. So this just to illustrate that recycling per se is not always leading to a more sustainable solution. So you need to be very careful for this. All right, next slide. So what are lessons of the LCA? Just to summarize this before we're going to move to the procurement process. As I said, the upstream processes contribute the most. Recycling is beneficial as long as you are aware of toxic elements. Yeah, transportation could offset benefits of recycling. So you see in general that recycling plants are mainly located close to the projects. It's because if you're going to transport this stuff over long distances, your all environmental benefits will be gone. So the objectives of procurement would be that we are going for higher rates of reclaimed asphalt, that we want to produce in the proximity of the construction site, that we also want to focus on lower temperature mixtures, because that's one of the reasons to just tackle the environmental impact of the energy use. And on the other hand, we want to make sure that we don't have risk on durability issues. And there are risks involved when using higher reclaimed percentages of reclaimed asphalt because of the insufficient adhesion. So you have risk for rupture resistance and distress of your asphalt pavement, which you want to avoid at any time. So, and the last one, of course, that's the most important one. You need to have a system, a process, an approach that you can compare different innovations on the same benchmark instead of a subjective choice. So bids should be comparable using objective parameters. Okay, next slide. Now, how did we achieve this objective? So as I said, we have already some experience in the Netherlands to use this environmental cost indicator, which combines all these aspects within one just indicator for environmental performance. That's the environmental part of it. And then the other one is that you need to have a set of rules, calculation rules, to just evaluate your functionality of your pavement. And in the Netherlands, we have general guidelines to do this in the Dutch Technology Platform for Transport, Infrastructure and Public Space. This is the organization within the Netherlands that are producing these guidelines. So we're asking actually that all the innovative solutions should fit in these guidelines. Otherwise, we have a risk in our project which we don't want. That's a little bit more detail, but in the first lot, as I said, was based on lowest price. We also there we say that we actually require the contractors to provide asphalt under a certain threshold of the environmental cost indicator, but we do this per ton. While in lots, the more innovation procurement lots, we're actually allowing them to use also other innovative construction methods. So not only focusing on the materials, but also the layer construction. So for example, if a contractor has an asphalt which has a higher environmental impact per ton, but he's able to use less material, then on a project level, he might come up with a lower environmental impact, which is actually what we want. So this gives more flexibility above the innovation on the materials. All right, the next one. Just quickly, there are 4 steps basically to do this. First, define your scope, then define the technical performance, then calculate a reference value, and then awarding a discount on the bid price. So just quickly, in the last 2 minutes, I will just quickly go through this methodology on this framework contract. So please go to the next slide, and I will just show how we did it. So define the scope. Now, you can imagine that if you're going to do a performance-based contract, you need to publish the requirements instead of the technicalities on how to do this. So mainly, you need to communicate the service area, the traffic data, some samplings, some layer construction details, so the contractors have a good feeling, have a good idea on the project itself. So that's what we actually provided them. And that's an important one because that's the situation that's there. So they need to provide a solution that fits in the local situation, the logic project details. Yeah, next one. Now, the second one is that you want to allow innovative bids, which means that you are going to find the lowest environmental cost indicator being achieved through either material choices or a layer design. And there are, of course, multiple solutions. On the other hand, you want to ask still for declaration of performance, which is a hurdle because it takes a long time for contractors to get these innovative mixtures evaluated, which is also a recommendation within this process to accelerate this process to get a more quicker auditing of the innovative solutions. And then, of course, as I said, you need to have a formal calculation rules. If you don't have these calculation rules, don't use environmental performance approach because then you're running up in big problems because you need to assess bids based on these calculation rules. So the prerequisite for doing this is that you need a harmonized set of calculation rules, both for technical performance and for the environmental impact. Yeah, next one. This is just the outcome. So we actually produce an Excel where these contractors publish their numbers and we're adding it up. And the idea of the environmental cost indicator is just that you have just a single indicator. So it's quite easy for public buyers to just compare different outcomes, which makes it also feasible to do this. Yeah, next one. And then, of course, calculate the winning bid, which is, of course, up to the procurement agency how to do this. In the Netherlands, we have this awards system that we have a fictitious amount of money that we subtract of the contract bid, which is quite straightforward. And because you have the environmental cost indicator expressed in euros, you can easily combine them with the bid price. So to find the most economic, how's it called in English, economic most advantage tender. So which is quite doable also in this case. All right, the last one to finish up. What was the market response? It was always, always a challenging thing because if you're trying to start these kind of projects, it's always kind of scary on how this will be received by the market. But in this case, we were quite surprised that, especially in lot 2, we had 4 contractors, which we didn't expect. So apparently, contractors nowadays can handle these kind of procurement approaches, at least in the Netherlands. So we're happy to have them on board. We found that reductions are around 50%. Of course, it's not really informative, this, because it depends on the reference value, how many reductions do you achieve. But in our case, we're quite surprised that it's quite below what we calculated ourselves. The asphalt producing industry is able to produce, in our case, up to 70% particular partial recycling within the asphalt. So it's quite possible to use higher recycling rates than has been used in general nowadays. And the other thing that we found that which was actually quite surprising, that contractors and producers are able to not only use higher recycled content, but also dematerialize, so use less material within their project. So apparently there are asphalt types that are both stronger while having a higher recycling rates within them, which is beneficial from both sides, both resource sides. It goes actually both ways. So that was it, just in a nutshell. Yeah, so thank you. And
thanks, Leon, very clear. Also for providing these details about the procurement, the procedure, the indicators, and also the interesting response from the market, which, as you said, it's always a challenge when you are pushing for innovation. I will now pass the floor to Maria to hear about the perspective from Lisbon in taking part in this working group and her plans towards recycled asphalt.
Thank you, Ivo. As you can imagine, there's a big gap between Netherlands and Portugal. We don't have so many things in public procurement and sustainable public procurement. Anyway, we are starting. It was very good to participate in this working group because we learned a lot with the experience from the big buyers, not the big buyers, but the big buyers. So I work in the direction of maintenance and conservation in Portugal, in Lisbon, which has all the works of from public procurements from infrastructures, municipal buildings, and public lighting, and we also make the public procurement for most of the city hall, so for the municipality. So we have a lot different kinds of procurement. So we refurbish and maintain all the infrastructures in the Lisbon municipality. Now, in 2019, when I joined the BBI, sustainable procurement was something that was not even talked about. We have some sustainable goals already. We already put in our procurement some principles, but anyway, we did not know yet really how to act. So it was very important that I shared all these. I heard from all these other members, a lot of ideas, interesting ideas and experiences. So we have some problems. I'm now focusing on some problems that we had to have to face towards the sustainable procurement and the goals. So we had a major crisis for a lot of years, as you know. So that led to the aging of the the, the staff in the Lisbon municipality, and also it is now we have about 2,000 less employees. So we are very few to do a lot of things. We have also a problem with the companies, the buyers, because they also have struggled to stay afloat for a few years, and now they are beginning to 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 be more financially secure. So we have been working in Portugal, of course, for many years with for the reduction of the carbon emissions and the energy efficient targets. And we have been following the recommendations of the European, and the legislation is already accommodating some a lot of recommendations for focusing on climate change and sustainable development. We want to focus on innovation, job creation, and the valorization of the natural heritage to combat climate change. In the Lisbon municipality, the first steps we took were especially on renewable energies and energy savings, active mobility networks like bicycles and scooters, and the contribution of the municipality to cycle paths, public transport, and investment in green spaces. So there were not actually some public procurement. It's only we want to change things so that the environment will be more sustainable. So in the last few years, we understand that the mentality has changed a lot in Portugal, and there is a greater investment in sustainability, both in municipalities and countrywide level. There's a paradigm shift that puts municipalities at the core, at the largest sustainability effort due to their large influence. For example, the municipality of Lisbon is one of the 10 largest national public purchasers in the country, involving over 2,050 suppliers of goods and services, and it has the responsibility to lead by example, influencing the external entities, namely the suppliers. So we have a sustainable procurement strategy at Lisbon municipality, and it's being implemented, and we have several documents at the municipality level that frame this public procurement, sustainable public procurement. One, I would like to say also that now we're having the sustainable procurement policy according to ISO 2400 and its framework. So we already are committed to include sustainability in all our procurement and all our purchases also. So to guarantee that the purchases made by the municipality are sustainable. We have, however, we have some factors such as the maturity of the market, the information needs of suppliers, and the capacity of purchases and these supplier structures have been key considerations for the decision to opt for a phased implementation. We have an enormous challenge and complexity of implementing this sustainable procurement, both from the market operation perspective and the organizational culture of the Lisbon municipality itself. The implementation of a support program was created to ensure a smooth transition to sustainable procurement. So we have a team, a specialized team, who is looking at every kind of procurement we have in the municipality and is trying to introduce sustainable criteria and connect them with the sustainable, all the procurement with the sustainable development goals. In the national market, the great influence of the SMEs and the low degree of maturity of construction companies when it comes to sustainability have commanded a program where financial and quality criteria prevail. Therefore, it is considered that there is still a path to be followed, and which implies involvement with the suppliers and partners. This support will knowledge and supports companies in the definition of their own internal policies and methodologies to address the issues that emerge with sustainability. With this policy, the municipality hopes to be able to influence the market, for it is aware of its representativity in the purchase volume of many companies and does not intend to with this process to exclude, but to inspire and encourage investment in sustainability and innovation solutions in companies and partners related to municipal public procurement. So some of the steps we are taking now is to engage with the market to create knowledge and collaborative strategies to increase its level of maturity in sustainability. So this we are already doing it in some centralized purchase. And also we did it on a pilot we are developing here in asphalt, in an asphalt procurement, public procurement. We want to mitigate risks of arising from supply chains. The weight of the criteria is defined according to the purchase category, type of procedures to be applied, and other context factors. So we carry out some pilots in the various strategies, categories of purchases in our universe. So, for example, we have this pilot on reclaimed asphalt, and also there is a pilot on the purchase of school meals, for example. So, let me just take some. Okay. So I'm going to fast forward. So we have some issues also with the public procurement because
Marie, if you could get close to the conclusions because we are a little bit late.
yes,
So-
yes, that's it. That's why I'm jumping into the conclusions or some different. So we, I don't know if you. I think I know it's the same thing in some countries and the other countries. We have a lot of problems with the public procurement because we want to we want to have the sustainable criteria, the work criteria, the performed based criteria, but we have a lot of conflict in our processes, and also the market is not yet very mature. So we don't have the knowledge to do as Rotterdam does with the ACI or double calc. We don't have those instruments. So we try to make it simple, or we are also trying to do it with some different approach. So we maybe only put we use market dialogue, we define the rules, and then we will say exactly what we want regarding to what is in the market. This is how we try to make the sustainable procurement, but we are developing the strategy with the ISO, and I think we'll go further. I'm sorry, it was a little bit confused, but the time was also making me nervous. Thank you.
Many thanks, Maria. No, we really got the strategy towards sustainable procurement from Lisbon. I think that we can start very quickly with some questions. We will go a little bit further the time of 12 o'clock, but at least to allow sort of some interaction. So let's, maybe Pietro can read the first question, which is addressed to...
We have a first question addressed to Silvia. Has there been any interest in the working group from suppliers or industry?
Thank you. Yes, there has been interest, and that's why we were able to meet market actors during our market dialogue sessions. That's why we were able to speak directly in person to representatives of asphalt producers. We met with some in Rotterdam. So there was a lot of interest in sharing the barriers and problems producers face in order for the buyers to understand what they need and what the challenges are. There was interest in underlining the risks of brought about by the crisis, the risks of basically going bankrupt if there are no more innovative ways of procuring asphalt and allowing producers more flexibility. However, it is also worth noting that, as we have said before, asphalt production is quite local. So in terms of the interest in pursuing international contracts, for example, here we saw the interest was more limited, but it really focused on pushing through some recommendations for updating the percentage of recycled asphalt, updating some regulations, producing some, for example, PCRs on a European level that would be applicable in majority of EU countries. So yes, there's been interest, there was interest, but we also saw that because of the topic being so local, the majority of the comments were related to processes.
Many thanks. Maybe I have a question while we collect a further question. I have a question to Leon. Asphalt pavement is already one of the world's most recycled materials. why would the road authorities limit the recycled content up to a certain percentage? Why does this happen?
Is that a question to me?
Yes, De Leon, this is for you.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons is that they want to have a risk on the performances in terms of so the structural performances, especially the surface layer. In the Netherlands, we have certain boundaries on certain maximum percentage of recycled content because of this. So I think it's a challenge, but also a question to the market and to suppliers that they can really prove that their sustainable solutions are really fit to the technical quality that we require. That's always a challenge, right? Because you don't want to have if you have a proven innovation, it's not anymore an innovation. So there's always a tension between innovation and also to prove that the innovation will work. But that's the reality that we are in. I think when we want to move from the piloting phase to the scaling up, we really need to have a system that the suppliers need to be aware that these solutions are really met the technical requirements that we have.
Thank you. We have another question still for Leon. What's your view regarding the use of recycled content derived from other waste streams, such as soft plastics in asphalt?
Yeah, what you heard nowadays is that we're not only focusing on closed loops systems, but also on open loops, which means that you're actually using waste streams from other product systems within your product. I'm not really into the details of the implication of plastics. I think I heard about plastic roads already in the Netherlands, that they are kind of trying to get this into the product system of asphalt. I'm not sure how that will last or what the environmental benefits are. But yeah, of course, if there are waste streams that can substitute certain raw materials within your primary life cycle, then why not using it? But it's a risk. You see it also in concrete. We have this bottom ash from incineration, which can be toxic materials when it is dispersing around the environment. So you need to be very careful to do this, but I think we shouldn't exclude it beforehand always. So it's worthwhile to look at it. Yeah.
There is another question has just arrived.
Yes, it is. Again for Sylvia. Has there been any interest in the working group from... Oh no, sorry, I'm reading again this one. Were there any challenges with the addressing topic by the group?
I think we partly tried to cover it, both me and Leon. Basically, what I mentioned also before, the fact that asphalt is so locally produced and depends on the local conditions as regards the material that would be used and also the transportation that is required. Those were challenges for the members from different countries where the situation is different, where the regulations might be a bit different, where the caps on how much recycled content you can have. So there were a lot of differences that always make this kind of cooperation more difficult, and it took some time to find a topic that would be generally beneficial for everyone. And that's why the group decided to focus on the performance-based approach, because this is something that all members found useful. And maybe also taking this opportunity to add to what Leon said, because I just remembered a very interesting and important argument that we heard from the market, was also to, when you build a road, already think about maintaining and reconstructing it. So you already think about what you can do with the material once you will be rebuilding the road. That means that when you're thinking about the mix, what will go inside the asphalt, think about if it will be able to, if you are going to be able to recycle it, if you are be able to reuse it, how much it could cost, and that may also be a topic and an issue that you want to consider when you think about plastic, for example, but also other materials. Because in an ideal world, in theory, there should not be any waste. You should be able to reuse all the asphalt that goes into the road. Of course, that's a challenging topic, but that should be the overall aim, that all of the material, most of the material can be reused.
Thanks a lot, Silvia, for this clarification, which explains basically how the full cycle has to be put in motion in order to go for circularity also in the field of asphalt. I really would like to thank the speakers for this very interesting presentation, and I would really quick introduce the new Big Buyers project, which is called Big Buyers Working Together. It will include 10 working groups. 6 of these will be in the field of digital and green, 2 will be in the field of health, and 2 will be in the field of social procurement. All working groups will be hosted on a digital platform which was launched on the 19th of April, and which provide opportunities for the working groups to work together and exploit all the value added which is provided by this significant IT tool. Next one, please. The Big Buyers works through a needs assessment, which so takes into consideration really bottom-up needs expressed by buyers taking part into the project. There is a contractor which organizes the work, organizes meetings, training, and also takes care of travel accommodation, which are free for all participants, and also animates the activities, which include, for example, exchange of best practice, market intelligence, joint market study, development of all participants in a joint manner of procurement approaches, exchange of ideas on contract performance and monitoring, and also, of course, the possibility to scale up the project. The new project also takes into consideration new activities which aim at really closing the gap between the innovation ecosystem and public procurement. So there will be also new hackathons, and this is new, learning expeditions, more challenges or pitching events with the suppliers, and also virtual meeting with all the decision makers of public buyers which take part into the Big Buyer project. Next slide, please. Well, this is the digital buyers platform, which has been launched and which will host the working groups, as I mentioned before. There is already a landing page which explains what is the Big Buyers project, why to get involved, who can join, also the successes and the results of the previous edition, like those which have been introduced earlier by Silvia. Also to recall very quickly some other relevant activities, for example, the help desk on green public procurement and socially responsible procurement, and in the slide you find the relevant contact details. This green and public procurement and socially responsible help desk also organizes regular webinars and also has a news alert on events, on good practices and interviews, and this is all communicated via a newsletter. Next one. And finally, to stay tuned, of course, there is our webpage and 2 LinkedIn groups, which you find here mentioned in the slides, and our YouTube channel, where all the recordings of our webinars, including this one, are stored. Now, all these webinars are also stored on our platform, and in the mail which will be sent to all participants, you will get the direct link to the platform in order for you to access all this material. Next slide. Plus, of course, the slides. Yes, there has been a request from one of the participants. All the slides which have been shown today by our speakers will also be shared with you by email, and of course on the platform. So many thanks again for your participation. I thank again our speakers, Maria, Leon, and Silvia, and hopefully you will find interesting this webinar, which we think looked at a very interesting and innovative aspect of public procurement and circularity. Many thanks.